Sophia Chen stared at her phone screen in disbelief. The number calling her at 2 a.m. was one she hadn't seen in months, her mother's lawyer. Her heart raced as she answered, still half asleep in her tiny studio apartment. "Miss Chen, I'm calling. On behalf of your mother, there's been an urgent development regarding your family's financial situation." The voice on the other end was formal but carried an undertone of concern. Margaret Chen had been battling cancer for 3 years, and the medical bills had drained every penny from their modest savings. Sophia had dropped out of art school to work multiple jobs, but it was never enough. The treatments were experimental and expensive, not covered by insurance. "What kind of development?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A business proposal, a very unusual one. I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning." The next morning, Sophia sat across from lawyer Jonathan Mills, her hands trembling as she read the document he placed before her. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, part business contract, part marriage proposal. The billionaire's dilemma, meanwhile, across the city, in his glass-walled penthouse office, Alexander Knight was having his own crisis. His father, James, had just delivered an ultimatum that would change his life forever. "The board won't approve the merger unless you settle down," James said, his voice cold and calculating. "They want stability, Alexander. They want a family man, not a workaholic. Bachelor who changes girlfriends like he changes suits." Alexander ran his fingers through his dark hair, a habit he'd developed during stressful moments. At 32, he had built a tech empire worth billions, but his personal life was a carefully controlled disaster. He had never allowed anyone close enough to hurt him, not since his mother abandoned the family when he was 12. "So you want me to get married for a business deal?" Alexander's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Not just any marriage, your strategic alliance. I've already found the perfect candidate." James slid a folder across the mahogany desk. Inside was a photograph of a beautiful young woman with kind eyes and an artist's gentle hands. Sophia Chen looked nothing like the sophisticated socialites Alexander usually dated. "She needs money for her mother's treatment. You need a wife for the merger. It's a business transaction that benefits everyone involved." The meeting of two worlds the restaurant James had chosen was elegant but discreet, the kind of place where million-dollar deals were made over expensive wine. Sophia felt completely out of place in her simple black dress, the only formal outfit she owned. Alexander arrived exactly on time, his tall frame filling out a perfectly tailored navy suit. When their eyes met across the room, both felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, as if they had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. "Miss Chen?" Alexander's voice was deeper than Sophia had imagined, with a slight roughness that suggested he wasn't as comfortable with this arrangement as he appeared. "Mr. Knight," she replied, proud that her voice didn't shake despite her racing heart. They sat in awkward silence for several minutes, both studying their menus as if they contained the secrets of the universe. Finally, Alexander spoke. "I assume you've read the contract." Sophia nodded. "His marriage for 2 years. Your father explained the financial arrangement. My mother's treatment would be fully covered, plus additional support for our family. And you're willing to enter into a marriage with a complete stranger for money?" There was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. Sophia's eyes flashed with a mixture of pride and desperation. "I'm willing to do anything to save my mother's life. But let me be clear, Mr. Knight, this may be a business arrangement, but I won't be treated like property." Alexander found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in months. There was fire in this woman, strength that intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. The first night revelation 3 weeks later stood before a judge in a simple civil ceremony. Sophia wore a cream-colored dress she had borrowed from her friend Grace, while Alexander looked impeccable in his black tuxedo. The ceremony was brief and impersonal, witnessed only by Alina, Alexander's assistant, and Margaret Chen, who was having one of her better days. That evening, Alexander showed Sophia to their new home, a sprawling mansion in the hills overlooking the city. The house was beautiful but cold, filled with expensive furniture but lacking any sense of warmth or personality. "Your room is on the second floor, East Wing," Alexander said as they walked through the marble-floored foyer. "My room is in the West Wing. We each have our own space and privacy." Sophia nodded, relieved. Despite the strange circumstances of their marriage, Alexander had been respectful and professional throughout their brief courtship. "There's one thing we need to discuss," Alexander continued as they reached the grand staircase. "The merger. Presentation is next week. We'll need to appear as a genuinely happy couple. Can you handle that?" "I can handle anything you need me to handle," Sophia replied with more confidence than she felt. But as they stood there in the dim light of the chandelier, something shifted between them. Alexander reached out almost unconsciously to brush a strand of hair from Sophia's face, and she didn't pull away. "You're not what I expected," he said softly. "What did you expect? Someone who would be impressed by all this?" He gestured around the opulent foyer. "Someone who would see dollar signs instead of what? Instead of seeing me?" The shocking discovery later that night, as Sophia explored her new surroundings, she discovered something that changed everything. In what appeared to be Alexander's study, she found dozens of paintings, beautiful, emotional works that captured feelings she didn't know he possessed. "You paint," she said, when she found him in the kitchen, having given up on sleep. Alexander's entire body tensed. "Those are private. They're incredible. You have real talent." It's just a hobby. "A way to—" He paused, struggling with words. "I— Therapist suggested it years ago. Said I needed an outlet." Sophia stepped closer, drawn by this unexpected vulnerability. "You see the world differently than most people think you do." "How do you know what I see?" "'Cause I'm an artist too. And these paintings tell me you're not the cold businessman everyone thinks you are." Alexander looked at her for a long moment, and Sophia could see him fighting some internal battle. Finally, he spoke. "My mother left when I was 12, said she couldn't handle the pressure of being a knight. My father made sure I never forgot that lesson, that people only stay if there's something in it for them." "Is that why you agreed to this marriage? 'Cause it's safer than risking real feelings?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Alexander had never met anyone who could read him so easily, who could cut through his carefully constructed walls with such precision. "Maybe," he admitted. "What about you? Why didn't you just ask for a loan instead of agreeing to marriage?" Sophia's laugh was bitter. "Banks don't give loans to unemployed art students with no collateral, because my mother needs treatment. Now, not after months of applications and rejections, because sometimes desperate people make desperate choices." They stood in the modern kitchen, two strangers bound by legal documents but drawn together by an understanding neither had expected to find. "This doesn't have to be completely fake," Alexander said suddenly. "The friendship, I mean, we're stuck. With each other for 2 years?" Sophia smiled, the first genuine smile she had given him since they met. "I'd like that." Friends who happened to be married for business reasons. But even as they made this tentative agreement, both knew that something had shifted that first night. The careful boundaries they had planned to maintain were already beginning to blur, and neither was prepared for where that might lead them, as they said goodnight and went to their separate wings of the house. Both Sophia and Alexander lay awake, wondering if they had just made the smartest or most dangerous decision of their lives. The marriage contract had been signed, but their real story was just beginning. 3 months into their arranged marriage, Sophia and Alexander had mastered the art of public deception. At charity galas and business dinners, they moved together like a couple deeply in love. Alexander's hand would rest protectively on Sophia's back, while she would lean into him with practiced affection. The media ate it up, calling them the perfect power couple. But behind closed doors, their relationship remained carefully platonic. They had breakfast together each morning, discussing their schedules and upcoming appearances. Alexander had insisted Sophia return to her art, converting one of the mansion's rooms into a bright, airy studio where she painted for hours each day. "The merger is almost finalized," Alexander announced one morning over coffee. "Once it goes through, we'll have more freedom to be ourselves." Sophia looked up from her sketch pad. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we won't have to perform as much. We can just be friends who happen to be married." But the word friends felt inadequate for what they had become. Over the past months, they had shared late-night conversations about their dreams, their fears, their past disappointments. Sophia had told Alexander about her father's gambling addiction that had contributed to their financial struggles. Alexander had confided about the loneliness of growing up with emotionally distant parents. Enemy emergist Thomas Reed had been watching Alexander Knight's meteoric rise for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As CEO of Reed Industries, Thomas had lost several major contracts to Alexander's company, and his resentment had grown into an obsession with revenge. When news of Alexander's sudden marriage broke, Thomas knew he had found his weapon. He began investigating Sophia Chen, digging into her background, her family's financial troubles, and most importantly, the suspicious timing of her marriage to one of the country's most eligible bachelors. "It's obviously a fake marriage," Thomas told his assistant as they reviewed the evidence he had gathered. "A business arrangement. If I can prove that, I can destroy the merger and Alexander's reputation in one move." Thomas hired private investigators to follow the couple, photograph them, and document any evidence that their marriage was a sham. What he didn't expect was how genuinely happy Alexander and Sophia appeared together. Even in their unguarded moments, Isabella's returner, Isabella Martinez, had been Alexander's fiancée 2 years earlier, before she decided his emotional unavailability wasn't worth his billions. She had married a European count instead, but the marriage had ended badly, leaving her with a modest settlement and a burning desire to reclaim her place in Alexander's life. When she learned about his new wife, Isabella was furious. She had assumed Alexander would remain single forever, unable to open his heart to anyone. The idea that he had found love with some unknown artist was unbearable. Darling Isabella purred when she cornered Alexander at a business conference. "You can't be serious about this little nobody you married. Sophia is my wife," Alexander replied coldly. "And I'd appreciate it if you showed her respect." "Wife?" Isabella laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Please, I know you, Alexander. You don't do love. You don't do genuine emotion. This is clearly some kind of business deal." Alexander felt his chest tighten with an emotion he didn't recognize. Was it anger at Isabella's disrespect toward Sophia? Or was it fear that she might be right about his inability to love? The housekeeper's wisdom, Maria Santos, had worked for the Knight family for over 20 years. She had watched Alexander grow, from a lonely child into an emotionally guarded man, and she had despaired of him ever finding happiness. But watching him with Sophia had given her hope. "You care for her," Maria observed one afternoon as she helped Sophia arrange flowers in the main hallway. Sophia's hands stilled on the roses she was arranging. "It's complicated, Maria. Love usually is, Mia. But I see how you look at each other when you think no one is watching. I see how he smiles now, really smiles, for the first time since his mother left." "But this marriage isn't real," Sophia protested. "It's a business arrangement. We both know it will end in 2 years. Maria's weathered hands covered Sophia's. "Younger ones. The heart doesn't know about business arrangements. The heart only knows what it feels." That evening, Sophia found herself studying Alexander as he worked on his laptop in the living room. When had she stopped seeing him as just her contractual husband and started seeing him as more? When had his rare smiles become the highlight of her day? The blackmail plot Thomas Reed's investigation had uncovered the truth about the marriage arrangement. But he needed more than just suspicions. He needed proof that would hold up in court and destroy Alexander's credibility with the merger committee. He decided to approach Robert Chen, Sophia's father, who was struggling with gambling debts that had only grown worse despite Alexander's financial support. "I can make your problems disappear," Thomas told Robert over drinks at a seedy bar. "All I need is some information about your daughter's marriage. Documents, recordings, anything that proves it's fake." Robert's hand shook as he considered the offer. He loved his daughter, but the debt collectors were becoming more aggressive. The money Alexander had provided for Margaret's treatment wasn't enough to cover Robert's gambling losses. "What kind of information?" Robert asked weakly. "Marriage? Contract details? Evidence that there's no real relationship. Maybe some recordings of private conversations where they discussed the arrangement." Robert felt sick, but the weight of his debts was crushing him. I'll see what I can do." The growing connection, unaware of the threats gathering around them. Alexander and Sophia were discovering that their fake marriage was becoming something unexpectedly real. It started with small moments, Alexander bringing Sophia coffee while she painted, Sophia waiting up for him when he worked late. One evening, Alexander found Sophia crying in her art studio. She was holding a letter from the hospital. Her mother's latest test results weren't good. "The experimental treatment isn't working as well as we hoped," Sophia whispered through her tears. Without thinking, Xander pulled her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed against his chest. The physical contact was electric, but more than that, it felt right in a way that scared them both. "We'll find another treatment," Alexander said, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll try everything." "Why?" Sophia pulled back to look at him. "Why do you care so much?" "For our deal." Alexander looked into her tear-stained face and realized he couldn't pretend anymore, because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a deal for me. The first kiss, the admission, hung between them like a bridge. They were both afraid to cross. Sophia's heart pounded as she searched Alexander's face for any sign that he was just saying what she wanted to hear. "Alexander," she whispered. "I know this complicates everything," he said, his hands still resting on her shoulders. "I know we agreed to keep this purely business, but I can't pretend I don't have feelings for you anymore." "What kind of feelings?" Sophia's voice was barely audible. Instead of answering with words, Alexander cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was giving her the chance to pull away. But Sophia melted into him, her arms winding around his neck as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "This changes everything," Sophia said. "I know," Alexander replied. "Are you okay with that?" Sophia stood on her tiptoes and kissed him again, pouring all her unspoken feelings into the contact. When they separated, she smiled. "More than okay." The trap is set while Alexander and Sophia were discovering their feelings for each other. Thomas Reed was putting his plan into motion. Robert Chen had provided him with copies of the original marriage contract and recordings of private conversations where Sophia mentioned the business arrangement. "This is perfect," Thomas told his lawyer as they reviewed the evidence. "We can prove the marriage is fraudulent, which will invalidate the merger approval and destroy Alexander's reputation." But Thomas wanted more than just business victory. He wanted to humiliate Alexander personally. He decided to make the evidence public at the merger celebration gala. In front of all of Alexander's business associates and society friends, "We'll expose them when they're most vulnerable," Thomas planned. "When they think they've won." The gala was scheduled for the following week, and invitations had already been sent to the city's elite. It would be the perfect stage for Alexander Knight's downfall. As part 2 ended, Alexander and Sophia had finally acknowledged their feelings for each other, but they had no idea that their happiness was about to be shattered by the enemy's gathering. In the shadows, the fake marriage that had brought them together was about to become the weapon used to tear them apart. The week leading up to the merger gala was the happiest of Sophia's life. She and Alexander had finally stopped pretending their feelings didn't exist, and the mansion that had once felt cold and impersonal now felt like home. They spent their mornings having breakfast together, not as part of their public performance, but as a couple genuinely enjoying each other's company. Alexander would tell Sophia about his business challenges, and she would share her artistic inspirations. In the evenings, they would cook together, paint together, or simply sit by the fireplace talking about everything and nothing. "I thought I could feel this way about anyone," Alexander confessed one night as they lay curled up together on the couch, watching the fire dance in the hearth. "What way?" Sophia asked, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "Safe, happy, like I don't have to be perfect all the time?" Sophia lifted her head to look at him. "You don't have to be perfect for me. I fell in love with the man who paints his emotions and brings me coffee while I work." It was the first time either of them had said the word love out loud. Alexander's arms tightened around her. "I love you too," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I didn't think I was capable of it." The betrayal revealed the night before the gala. Sophia received an unexpected call from her father. Robert's voice was shaking, and he sounded like he had been drinking. "Sophia, I need to tell you something. I've done something terrible." "Dad, what's wrong?" "I gave information to someone. About your marriage. About the contract." Sophia felt her blood turn to ice. What kind of information? Through his tears, Robert confessed everything: the gambling debts, Thomas Reed's blackmail offer, the recordings, and documents he had provided. By the time he finished, Sophia was crying too, but her tears were of betrayal and heartbreak. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she whispered. "You've destroyed everything." She hung up and immediately called Alexander, who was at his office making final preparations for the gala. When she told him about her father's betrayal, the silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "Alexander, Are you there? I'm here. His voice was cold, distant.
Ow.
I need to think about this. What's there to think about? We need to figure out how to handle Thomas Reed's attack? Do we? Alexander's question cut through her heart like a blade. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe it's time to end this charade before it goes any further. Charade. Sophia couldn't breathe. Is that what this has been to you? Sophia, be realistic. This was always temporary. We both knew that. Maybe it's better to end it now before we get in any deeper. The line went dead and Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief. The man who had held her in his arms just hours earlier, who had told her he loved her, was now treating their relationship like it meant nothing. The public humiliation, despite everything, Sophia decided to attend the gala. She wouldn't give Thomas Reed or Alexander the satisfaction of seeing her hide. She wore a stunning emerald green gown that Alexander had bought for her and held her head high as she entered the ballroom. Alexander was across the room, surrounded by business associates. When their eyes met, his expression was carefully neutral, as if she were a stranger. Sophia felt her heart break a little more. The evening proceeded normally until, Thomas Reed took the stage during the dinner portion of the event. Sophia's stomach dropped as she realized what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas began with a cruel smile. I think you all deserve to know the truth about our host's marriage. He proceeded to play recordings of Sophia discussing the business arrangement, display copies of the marriage contract, and present evidence that their relationship was nothing more than a profitable deception. The room erupted in shocked whispers and scandalized gasps. Sophia felt hundreds of eyes on her, judging her, condemning her. She wanted to disappear, to run away, and never show her face in society again. But then something unexpected happened. Alexander stood up. The choice for love, Thomas, is right, Alexander, said his voice carrying clearly through the stunned ballroom. My marriage to Sophia began as a business arrangement. Sophia closed her eyes, bracing herself for the final blow. Thomas is also wrong about something very important, Alexander continued. He's wrong about what our marriage became. Alexander walked across the room to where Sophia sat, his eyes never leaving her face. Sophia, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but the biggest one was what I said to you tonight on the phone. I let fear make me cruel, and I hurt the person I love most in the world. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Alexander dropped to one knee beside Sophia's chair. I don't care if everyone in this room knows how our marriage started. I only care about how it continues. Sophia Chen Knight, will you marry me again? Not for business, not for convenience, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you? Tears were streaming down Sophia's face as she looked at this incredible man who was choosing love over reputation, truth over appearances. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. Of course. Yes. The ballroom exploded in applause, but Sophia and Alexander only had eyes for each other as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of everyone who mattered in their world. Justice and redemption in the aftermath of the gala, Detective Rodriguez launched an investigation into Thomas Reed's blackmail scheme. With Robert Chen's cooperation, they were able to gather enough evidence to press charges against Thomas for extortion, bribery, and corporate espionage. The scandal actually worked in Alexander's favor. The merger committee was impressed by his handling of the crisis and his willingness to prioritize personal integrity over business appearances. The merger was approved with even better terms than originally negotiated. Dr. Amanda Foster, a therapist both Alexander and Sophia had begun seeing, helped them work through the trust issues created by the betrayal and Alexander's momentary doubt. Love requires courage, she told them during one session. The courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to choose each other every day. Sophia's relationship with her father took longer to repair. Robert entered a gambling addiction program and slowly began to rebuild the trust he had shattered. No, I don't deserve forgiveness, he told Sophia months later, but I want to be the father you deserved, all along. The real wedding 1 year after the gala incident, Alexander and Sophia renewed their vows in a ceremony that was everything their first wedding hadn't been. It was held in the mansion's garden, surrounded by friends and family who loved them. Margaret Chen, whose health had stabilized thanks to a new treatment Alexander had funded, walked Sophia down the aisle. Lucas Knight, Alexander's younger brother who had flown in from Europe, served as best man. Grace Wilson, Sophia's best friend, was maid of honor. "A year ago I married you because I thought I had no choice," Sophia said during her personally written vows. "Today, I'm marrying you because I choose you every day for the rest of my life." Alexander's vows brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Sophia, you taught me that love isn't something that makes you weak. It's something that makes you brave. You are my courage, my joy, and my home." The Art of Love. 5 years later, the Knight Foundation had opened 3 art therapy centers, providing free programs for underprivileged youth. Sophia served as the artistic director while continuing her own painting. Alexander had learned to balance his business empire with his personal life, never again allowing work to come before love. They had 2 children, a daughter named Elena Margaret and a son named James Alexander. The mansion that had once been cold and empty now rang with laughter and music. On quiet evenings, Alexander and Sophia would often sit in her art studio, where she painted while he worked on his laptop. Sometimes they would talk, sometimes they would work in comfortable silence, but always they were together. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophia asked one evening, as she put the finishing touches on a painting of their children playing in the garden. "Regret? What?" "The way we started, the contract, the arrangement, all of it." Alexander set aside his laptop and pulled her into his lap, being careful not to disturb her paints. "Never. Every choice, every mistake, every moment of pain, it all led us here. How could I regret the path that brought me you?" As they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors through the studio windows, both Alexander and Sophia knew that their love story was far from over. What had begun as a business arrangement had become the greatest love story of their lives, proving that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings.